Hey everyone, welcome back, and in this video let's just go ahead and take a look at grid as well with Tailwind, how you can work with grids. And grid is also a great way to build UIs, especially two-dimensional UIs where you want a lot of customization and control over a grid sort of formation instead of just the flexbox, which allows you to either work horizontally or vertically. So in this case we're going to start off with a very simple example where we could probably create something like this only. So I'm going to start off with the same thing, but let's say if I give each of them a dimension of 20 as well, get rid of the flex grow thing. So we can go ahead and do something like this. And over here, instead of flex, I'm going to change this to grid. Now this allows us to use all the properties which we have, right? So in this case, you can see I can use grid columns 4, which means that this should be organized in columns of 4. So if we have like a bunch of more such elements, right, I can say grid calls 4 or 3 in this case, and you can see they equally line up in 3 different grids, right? And I could just probably say this as W full instead of restricting the width, and you're going to see that it combines. And of course this is not visible right now, so what we can say is gap of 1, which is like a grid property which allows you to give a little bit of gap between all these elements. Similarly, you can play around with other properties of column start, template start, row start, and row end. So for example, in case of call start or call span, I can go to a particular grid and give it a property of, let's say, this one right here as call span of 2, and get rid of this one over here. So you can see that the second one now spans 2 columns. So you can play around with more properties of grid by looking at the documentation and whatever your layouts demand you to do. But it's basically CSS, right? You can see the equivalent CSS as well over here. Sometimes the CSS might be a little bit more complex in a way because Tailwind might be using variables and all sorts of stuff in the CSS. But if you understand the premise of what Tailwind is doing, it's easier to build complex layouts over here as well. So you see it has pretty much support for all the grid properties which we have learned in the CSS module in the CSS section. And it also has property support for Flexbox, which we also looked at in a couple of videos before. But I think we skipped over the justify content items and this sort of stuff, which is also like pretty basic and one of the few things which we discuss like almost immediately once we start working with Flexbox. So I hope that you remember the justify content and left and right and center and all that stuff from the CSS module. If you do not, then go back into your full stack learning path or front end learning path and take a look, and these properties basically just plug and play and allows you to write those particular styles. So yep, that's pretty much it for grid as well in Tailwind. In the coming videos when we'll build some apps or something with the Tailwind CSS, we're going to be using a lot of this stuff. So make sure you keep an eye out on not only just this course but in other courses ahead where we would use Tailwind to build stuff. So that is all for this one. I'm going to see you in the next video really soon.